Salutations and welcome, friends, to a very special Trust the Profits episode. We are spotlighting several contenders for this year, the 2023 Kentucky Oaks. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And joining me today is contributor here on Trust the Profits, Michael Pellerin. Michael, thank you so much for joining me on these videos today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to talk about the Oaks. I'm happy to be, joining and contributing to the Trust the Profits team. So happy to dive right in and start with some of the major contenders here.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into our first major contender that we're going to cover on the Spotlight series, which is, of course, Brad Cox's Wet Paint, who is the likely favorite in this field, remember to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our Trust the Profits content, whether it's the Spotlight videos, top 10 videos, whether it's various video replays looking at different contenders in this field. Colin Sheehan's doing a great job with that. We also have live betting contests on Thursday evenings at Evangeline Downs. I'm going to be doing Cap in the Card for Keeneland closing day. We got all sorts of content for you, whether you're into the Kentucky Derby or just following graded stakes and regular racing across the industry. We got something for you here. Make sure to like this video and comment below with what you think of Wet Paint's chances are in the Kentucky Oaks. Now, Michael, before we dive into Wet Paint specifically, I'm interested, what are your thoughts in general in this year's Kentucky Oaks? We talk a lot about the Kentucky Derby being wide open. It feels like the Kentucky Oaks is a pretty wide open race as well.
Yeah, I'm usually a huge fan of the Oaks in general and the Philly division all year long. Philly and Mare division is always super interesting to me. You get superstars, Midnight Bisou, Monomoy Girl, Clairiere, Secret Oath. But this year, there wasn't a lot of hype around this Oaks Trail. You had horses that we thought were going to be major contenders, and then you'd see them get to the track and they kind of underperformed. So we're kind of in a muddled situation where, like you said, it's anyone's game. And the horse we're going to talk about today, Wet Paint, looks to be the morning line favorite, deservedly so, just because everyone else has kind of said, it's not going to be me, might as well be someone. So it's going to be a great betting race, and we'll see how it turns out from here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, I'm always reminding people last year, of course, we had those four dominant fillies of Kathleen O, Echo Zulu, Nest, and Secret Oath, and it felt like they were just sweeping all the races they were in the various circuits. And really, the only filly to sweep a circuit is the one we're going to talk about today, Wet Paint, who won all three Philly Kentucky Oaks prep races at the Oaklawn circuit. And so she is, as you can see in this picture, often covered with mud at the end of the race because she is coming from well off the pace. But she is a really intriguing horse for Brad Cox. Flavien Prat is going to be the jockey. You see that pedigree, Blame up top. You have a Street Cry Dam underneath. A lot to like here in terms of a pedigree play from Paint. But interested, Michael, kind of what are your just overall impressions of Wet Paint? She was a horse, I feel like, who had a lot of questions as she progressed through that Oaklawn circuit, but seemed to answer the bell at every call.
Yeah, I mean, she's very familiar to the Oaklawn circuit champion last year, Secret Oath. Has that come from behind strategy, working in the slop, working on the fast track. So there's a lot to like. And if you liked Secret Oath last year, there's really no reason you shouldn't like Wet Paint this year.
Yeah, and she's got a very interesting running line. When you look at her past performances, I think there was a lot of questions, in particular last time out in the fantasy, because when you look at the way she started her career on the turf at Kentucky Downs, you don't often see that as a starting point for an eventual Oaks filly, but then switched to the dirt, but then ran on synthetic, and then ran on two extremely sloppy sealed tracks at Oaklawn in the Martha Washington and the Honeybee. And I think a lot of people were questioning, can she handle a dry, fast track? And she answered that question in the fantasy, just blowing away the competition, beating Taxton, Olivia Twist in that race. I'm interested. I know you watched a lot of these race replays for all these different fillies. She's got that alluring come from behind style. What other things have you noticed about Wet Paint, or kind of what really stands out to you in terms of her performances in some of these races?
Yeah, and so one of the things you always look at with these closers is, are they going to run into traffic problems, especially in the Oaks field, which is 14 horses, which is more than any of these fillies are going to face all year. You always are worried about those traffic problems. It happened to Ness last year, but she's always able to make her trip. And Flavien Prat is excellent about finding the holes, and whether it's a tight rail-hugging ground-saving trip or swinging along the outside, Wet Paint's done it all. So I think this horse is going to be in a place to make that run. She is all the way in the way back, so that is something to be concerned about. But like you said, she's run on every surface, turf, synthetic, dirt, slop, fast track. So she's got that versatility. She's been all over, Kentucky Downs, Turfway, Oaklawn. So it's not like she's just a homer in Kentucky. So her versatility is going to be a big weapon for her.
Yeah, and if you watch the fantasy, I thought it was particularly interesting. These fillies are going to be stretching out a little bit from a mile and a 16th to a mile and an eighth, and she went wide that trip. I mean, Flavian, I feel like, knew what he had under him, and he just knew that she was going to be much the best, and very confidently handled. Reminded me actually very similar to the way Irad handled Forte in the Fountain of Youth. Just listen, we're going 4 wide. We're going to stay out of trouble. To your point, coming from far back, we don't want to get bogged down in the middle. If the rail doesn't open up, we just don't want to get stuck in a position where we don't get loose until late. She does have a very dynamic turn of foot, and she does kind of make that same type of middle move that seems to work at Oaklawn Park that you mentioned Secret Oath had last year, where I was really struck in that fantasy how she really kind of made up a ton of ground going around the third and fourth turns more than anything else. And then when they leveled off at the top of the stretch, she was kind of on even terms with everybody, and she had made up all that ground kind of rather than waiting until the home stretch. She had kind of made it around the turn. She's got a very interesting running style in that regard. And yeah, I think, she's obviously going to be one of the favorites. I mean, I'm curious kind of at what price, and this is getting a little bit into the betting side of things, at what price are you no longer comfortable kind of maybe using her as a win candidate and considering how evenly matched a lot of this field is?
Yeah. And so I think that speaks a lot to the level of the field that we have here, is that I expect her to be, 2-1 or something like that, like crazy. Mm-hmm. And honestly, she might be worth it at that price because, like you said, if she's even with these horses when they hit the stretch, nobody's going to touch her. She's going to blaze by them. So at that point, you're just hoping that she runs into some kind of traffic problems and you're getting a price somewhere else. So I think she's a deserved favorite. If she gets caught way far back, I think that's the only thing that's going to hold her up. I'm going to look at her if she's around 3-1, I think just fire. Key her on top of everything you got. I don't think there's any chance she finishes worse than second or third. So if you're looking to play your tries or exactas, key her underneath and hope to get a price on top. Hopefully something happens like what happened to Ness last year, where she got caught on the inside. Secret Oath was able to power home, but Ness still finished really fast and got up to finish. So I think you're going to key all of your bets around her. I don't think she gets underneath even money. There's just too many things going on here. I think it's very rare that you'll find that. And with her speed figures being fairly competitive with the others on like a paper standpoint, she's not firing 90 to 100 plus buyers or Brisnets. On paper, she looks fairly similar to what these other horses are running, but visually, when you actually watch these races, she's completely stunning. And so I'm looking to key her. I'm not going to be looking to beat her, and I think we're going to get a good enough price to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This Oaks field, you mentioned, horses that we thought were going to show up didn't end up showing up, et cetera. I mean, the only other filly that I was really interested to see run against Wet Paint was a filly that's not going to make it in the field. This is Punch Bowl, another one of Brad Cox's fillies, actually, who just came up just short at the Ashland last time out in the Bluegrass and only got second place in that race, and therefore didn't earn enough points to get into the field as I think the 24th or 25th choice. So, or I'm sorry, 18th or 19th choice, I should say. So unlikely to get in. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, from a paper standpoint, I think the last race was an 89 buyer, which is not overwhelming by any stretch, especially when you compare it to last year's crop that was firing in the 90s at this point. But you're right. Visually, she's impressive. She's got that incredible turn of foot. And you do understand why they may have started her on the turf in that regard, because she does have that kind of turn of foot that you would expect from turf horses. But she's something else. And you can't help but fall in love with these deep closers. And I do feel like there might be a little bit of pace in this race that might be aided by another Brad Cox horse that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, another spotlight, who's probably going to be on the front end. But where Wet Paint's going to be in this one. She's going to be in the back. And I think to your point, you made a great point. I think that I don't think she's going to get bet down below even money because the presence of Wonder Wheel, who just recently drew into this field. She's the juvenile fillies champion. I think a lot of people really like her. I'm probably a little less warm on her than others. We'll talk about her in a little bit, and again in the Spotlight series. But I think a presence of a few other big name horses will keep her from getting bet down too much. So, Michael, I appreciate you joining me on this Spotlight for Wet Paint and the Kentucky Oaks. Thank you, all of you, for out there watching. Make sure to press that subscribe button. Make sure to like this video, comment below with what your thoughts are for wet paint in the Kentucky Oaks. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis. That's Michael Pellerin reminding you it's now post time.